Thank you. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. This talk is completely sold out. Sydney Opera House told me they could have sold this event over several times. So you are the lucky ones. We are joined here by Denise Ho. I'm sure she needs no introduction. She had a very snazzy animated introduction for all of you. But in case you didn't know much about her, although I'm sure that's not the case, she is a Cantopop star turned pro-democracy activist. In 1996, she won the New Talent Singing Awards on Hong Kong television. She was mentored by Anita Mui, but she found her voice truly in the 2010s, when she became, in 2012, the first woman to come out in Cantopop. And in 2014, she became the first celebrity to be arrested during the Umbrella movement. And her song, Raise the Umbrella, became the unofficial anthem for the whole protest movement. In response, her music was dropped from the mainland Chinese market, forcing her to fundraise her own concerts and setting up her own independent record label. And she is here to talk to us about what is happening in Hong Kong today. And I know it is an incredibly live issue. People have been telling me that even in the queue for this event, people have been watching live streams of what's going on in Hong Kong right now. So I want to make sure that everyone is up to speed and everyone's on the same page as to what's been going on in Hong Kong. So Denise, would you like to give a quick refresher update on what's been going on in the last 24 hours to a week?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the Sydney Opera House to have me here in Sydney for the first time. I'm very honored to give this presentation with Zing here. And I'm wondering if I should be speaking Cantonese today. There are a lot of... who's from Hong Kong? Okay, so like 99%? Okay, so those who are not from Hong Kong, this presentation is for you guys. They are probably up to date with everything. So yes, this has been a very, very critical situation since the past 13 weeks in Hong Kong. Just yesterday, it has been an infuriating day for all Hong Kongers, whether they're in Hong Kong or overseas here in Australia. And so I'm going to give an update and then we'll go back into the background of this whole anti-extradition bill movement that has evolved into this really fight for freedom for Hong Kongers. So 2 days earlier, we had arrests from activists, pro-democracy activists like Joshua Wong, Agnes Chow, who are from Demosisto, and also there have been more than 5 legislators who have been arrested just Friday night. And this was before the day where we were supposed to have a protest in Hong Kong on the 31st of August. And so this protest was banned. The police did not give the permit for the people, the organizers, to have this protest on the streets. But as we have been accustomed to these bans in Hong Kong, Hong Kongers still went onto the streets in mass, and there were so-called religious rallies, and Hong Kongers are very capable in finding ways when we have these doors closed in our face. So huge amounts of people came onto the streets, and of course it evolved into a very, very violent clampdown from the police. And of course, this is the slogan that came during these past weeks. It was you who taught me that peaceful marches are useless. And so what happened was tear gases and rubber bullets, of course, have been fired into the people since early afternoon yesterday, I think around 3 or 4 p.m. And then it evolved into the first real genuine use of the water cannons, which have been dyed with blue dye, that has, and also I think tear gas chemicals that were in these water cannons. So that was what happened just yesterday.
And the blue dye is to identify people, correct?
Yes, exactly. And then, of course, it evolved into a lot of different areas, residential areas and different districts. And then the police, because they have been basically given full authority the past weeks to arrest and to really beat up people as they wish. And so a lot of arrests happened. And these undercover police were dressed as protesters, and they were witnessed to have even, this is not completely fact-checked, but there have been solid evidence that these so-called protesters who are undercover police, they have been provoking the people, even maybe throwing Molotovs into the crowds.
And that's the video you're about to show us
yes,
now.
the next video is these undercover police, they have been arresting people who have been in the movement with them. Let's take a look. And I mean, please take note that they have no identification whatsoever. And that has been the case since early June. Like the police, they have covered up all their identity numbers and warrant cards deliberately to not be identified. And so we have no means to know if these are real police or no, they could be anyone, really. And so he is not answering the question whether he is a police. They are just arresting people. And in, of course, a very inhumane way. And so there have been all sorts of tear gas and different bullets that we cannot even identify that have been fired into the people, and real bullets, cartridges that have been found. And of course, it evolved into the night where protesters have reacted very, of course, aggressively, because we have been bullied for the past 13 weeks. And I would like to give some context to why the protest has evolved into more aggressive means.
Right.
And that is, of course, because of the police brutality that has been going on. And we do not have any sort of way to file complaints. The only commission that we have is also under the government, and so the only way that we can do so is we have to go into the police station to file a complaint, and then these police would decide if they would want these complaints to go to this commission. So basically, it's useless.
And of course, if the police are covering up their identification numbers, how do you know who's the police officer who attacked you?
Exactly. So that has been a frustration that we had since June, and that with the police arresting and detaining and also beating up people as they wish, the protesters have come to the point where we have to defend ourselves. And so these were images from last night. And of course, the most infuriating moment was when the police, they went into the MTR stations I really don't know for what reason. There have been claims that because there was a pro-Beijing middle-aged man who was beating up people with a hammer on the green line of the MTR station. And then so people called the police in, and the riot police, they went into the station, but they went on the other side of the line and they beat up people really randomly. And so
So talk me through what's happening in this photo. What are they being sprayed with? Is that
this is probably pepper spray,
right?
I believe. And I have a video of what actually happens. So let's take a look.
客務一個控制室嘅玻璃啦，而家咧轉去電車廂入邊啦，係太子站車廂入邊，咁有速龍小隊嘅人咧就係、向住一批人咧就發射催淚氣體，即係催淚水劑。咁情況有啲混亂啦，有頭先見到咧喺有警察啦揮動警棍，有市民啦情緒激動。我哋未知道現場係發生咩事啊，咁不過咧
So this was after the police left. And they would not let the first aided go in. And they were basically just beating up people randomly. And we have experienced a similar situation in July 21st, where there were white shirts triad mobsters who went into the MTR station exactly the same way, and they beat up people with wooden sticks and bamboo sticks and metal sticks. And so last night when we saw this, of course I was in Sydney, and when I saw this, I was furious because we are officially in a police state where we are in face of a very critical humanitarian crisis, where the police have full authority to do whatever they want with the people, and the government is hiding behind the police force.
So I think now might be a good time to go back into the background of these protests and what they're about. Although, given the fact there's so many Cantonese people here, maybe that's not entirely useful. I'm just going to do this for the minority of you here who might not understand why these protests are happening. So the extradition bill was put forward to LegCo, and basically human rights observers are concerned that if the extradition bill were to be passed, basically anyone who is critical of the Chinese government could find themselves being extradited to China to face any kind of punishment, that they wouldn't have any kind of rights as a Hong Konger. And of course, this sparked enormous amounts of protests. Carrie Lam, who is executive of Hong Kong, has announced that the bill is indefinitely shelved, which you may interpret as you wish. What the protesters are demanding is that the bill is terminated. And of course, this all goes back to the 1997 handover of Hong Kong to China, when China promised to adhere to the one country, two systems law, where Hong Kong could be allowed to retain its constitutional integrity and independence from China until 2047. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Unfortunately, it is now 22 years into that promise, and things are looking very, very different on the ground. So in order to see what the protests have been truly like, I think it's informative for us to look at how the protests have played out. So we have a short video to show you the scale and magnitude of the protests, because don't forget that at one point, 1 in 4 Hong Kongers were out on the streets protesting against the extradition bill.
Yes, let's take a look. So that's very emotional for me.
How do you feel looking at footage of those protests?
I mean, it's only been 2.5 months, and it's so much has changed. Sorry. And because, I mean, 加油. I really want the world to know that this, although we are seeing a lot of violence from all sides at this moment, this really started out as a largely peaceful protest in June.
It's okay, take as much time as you need.
And no, as you can see in these images, this was in early June. We had a 1 million people protest. We had no response from the government. They wanted to push the extradition bill ahead. And then next week, we had 2 million people on the streets. And so, no, we tried all sorts of ways to get our voices heard, to get to the government, but they only responded with tear gas, more tear gas, rubber bullets, sponge bullets, police brutality for more than 13 weeks now. We're going into the 14th week, and we have lost 6 lives because of despair, because from suicides of young people. We lost 6 young people, young precious lives, and we got more suppression from the police, and one girl even lost an eye because she was shot from a high level by the police with a beanbag bullet. And so we are seeing not only young protesters on the streets, really, it's people from all walks of life. This is a man, he came in front of a police officer who was, he was previously chased by protesters because they were chasing him with sticks. And then he pulled out his gun. And then this man, he went in front of these officers and he was asking them to, don't shoot them. Where does this courage come from? Hong Kong has never been known to be a political, conscious society. We have always been very indifferent. The previous generations were mostly about the economy. Mm-hmm. We had a relatively peaceful society where nothing like this has ever been seen before. And now people have been pushed to this edge where really, these young people, they are fighting for their lives and for their future. And I really have no words for the situation right now. Although, we have a remarkably smart and capable young generation. They have used all sorts of means in front of these very critical situations. And still at this moment, this is a leaderless, decentralized movement. Although the Hong Kong government, they are reluctant to believe in this fact, but it is the truth. We are leaderless. And no, they are still claiming that there are foreign forces coming into the movement. We are organized by some sort of mysterious force, but it is just not the truth. This is a totally voluntarily, it's not even organized. I mean, it's evolved into this decentralized movement where people are pitching in all sorts of ways. Like everyone is taking their own role, doing whatever they can. Young protesters in the front lines, and even like barristers, lawyers, accountants, administrative officers who have spoken up and trying all sorts of ways.
Or even on a smaller level, I've seen pictures of people buying single fare train tickets for protesters and leaving them in the MTR stations.
Yes.
Or giving out food to protesters,
yes.
Medical aid. So it seems like the protests are touching every single level of Hong Kong society.
Yes.
How do you think it's become so huge?
Well, no, I gave a talk just 2 weeks ago in San Francisco, and I was elaborating on how this happened. Now, this is the question that most of the international world has been asking, like, how has this been able to become this sustained fight? And so I have like 3 very simple answers to this, and it's actually very old school. First, it's we have an online forum where people strategize and pitch ideas, and then they could vote on these different ideas coming from everywhere. And then the most upvoted ideas would be turned into actions, such as, this is the Stand with Hong Kong at G20 campaign, where these protesters, they crowdfunded, I think, 3 or 4 million Hong Kong dollars within hours to put up front page ads in different newspapers worldwide. And this was done within days. And of course, these different ideas would become, there would be promotional posters that would be designed by anonymous designers, and they would be up the next day. And then we would be distributing these artwork on Telegram, on Facebook. So we have this sort of like a communication system that has naturally been set up on the Telegram, the app, where there would be channels for general information, for these artwork, and then for first aiders, for on ground, like scouting, where people could send in information of, oh, I saw police in such or such street, and then these information could get to the people very easily. So basically, Hong Kong people have been utilizing all sorts of tools on the internet to really get the word out and to get organized. And because this is a very decentralized movement, comparatively to the days of the umbrella movement, where we had a few organizations, student unions and like pan-democrats trying to organize people, which became very slow in its actions. So this time around, because we have learned from our mistakes, so the actions are taken like within days. Things could happen and could evolve and change. And like at different occasions where maybe something didn't work out as planned, then people, like the young protesters, they would come out into public and apologize. And then they would evolve, and then they would really just strategize accordingly. And that was why this, originally, it was just 2 million people march. It evolved into this very sustained fight that, it got its power in its decentralization. And of course, it is very unique to Hong Kong people, because Hong Kong people, as you all know, are very flexible and very capable in finding new means to different situations.
How do you see your own role in these protests? Do you see yourself as an international advocate, going to places like Antidote in Sydney and trying to talk to people about what's going on to raise awareness? Do you see yourself as someone on the ground who's reporting from the front lines and recording it so that misinformation can be combated? do you see yourself as a voice of this protest even, or do you just see yourself as someone who's simply trying to support what's going on?
I guess I'm taking up a few different roles. I see myself as a very very recognizable face and participant of this movement. I'm not a leader whatsoever. I am one of the people. But since this is a very anonymous fight where people have been putting on masks in fear of being recognized by the police and then being arrested in face of different political repercussions. So most of the people are reluctant in revealing their identities. So in that context, I can be the one of the people who can get their voices heard, and whether it's on the ground where I can give some sort of emotional support to some people, because as you might know, most of the celebrities have been silencing themselves in Hong Kong in fear of being blacklisted, as I have been, by the China market, by the communist government. And so another role is that on the international platforms where, of course, the press, they're trying to get a hold of someone to speak to, and is increasingly difficult. So I might be one of the candidates that they can reach, and I can help tell the story to the international world.
You spoke about what's happening in Hong Kong at the United Nations, and you were interrupted twice by the Chinese delegates.
Yes.
What was going through your head when you got interrupted twice during that 2.5-minute speech?
Well, frankly speaking, I was expecting that, and maybe I was provoking them a bit. Because I do think that that was only proof to what I was saying, that they are this authoritarian government who does not allow free speech and who suppresses anyone who dares to stand up against them. So those 2 times that they were trying to interrupt me, it's just, they're just helping me prove that point. And so, but, I'm not someone who has been involved in politics. I am originally just a singer, someone who is maybe a so-called celebrity. And I'm not a politician. I'm not someone who's accustomed to these platforms. But then that is the beauty of this movement, is that everyone is learning and is evolving in full speed. And there are different roles that everyone is taking up. So if that is something that I am able to do in this movement, then so be it. I'll try my best. I might not be as articulate as some politician, but still, I mean, if that's something that I can do, in this movement, then I'll just try my best to do whatever I can.
How do you view your music now in relation to your actual activism? Has it taken a backseat?
Yes, unfortunately. But I do think that this role as a creator is very, very important in these times where everything is censored. The news can be censored, and it can be erased even, and the people are intimidated into silencing themselves. We have seen businesses, international businesses actually, like our airlines, the Cathay Pacific, and even the MTR stations, they have been closing down stations in fear of being, in fear of these political repercussions from the Hong Kong government and, of course, the communist government behind them. So in these times, I think creativity, the arts, music, movies is actually the place where the fight can go on, and they can lock you up, they can ban you from going into the country, or they can censor your name even on Chinese social media, but they cannot really control your mind, like the creativity. And with the internet right now, if something goes out into the world, then it's there forever, like some song or any piece of artwork, really. So I'm struggling with the balance of these two sides, but I'm very aware of this role that I should not put aside. At least in the coming years, I do believe that is something that is very empowering to the people and also to myself, because that's the only way I can really express myself freely. And I would encourage really anyone, if in the audience or those who would be watching this speech afterwards, to really get your creative juices flowing, because that is where the fight can be sustained.
Right. Yeah. And what about the role of these street protests? Do you think that these street protests will continue happening for as long as the 5 demands of the protesters aren't being met, one of which is, of course, indefinite terminating the extradition bill? Or do you think that the fight needs to evolve to become something else in order for it to be sustainable?
Well, I do think that we are at a point of no turning back, really, especially after last night, where the police have really been completely out of hand. And so, Hong Kong people are furious at this moment, and we are expecting the situation even maybe to escalate in September, before the 70th anniversary of on the 1st of October. That's coming in a month. So what will happen during this month? Nobody really can answer that question. What we can do in the moment is really to become more united in our fight, and to become very strategic, really, in face of this huge machine that is the communist government, and really to evolve in our fight. Yeah.
And what do you think needs to happen in terms of strategy? Do you think that the international community should be doing more to support Hong Kong? Do you think that more media attention should be paid towards the protest from the international media? What can people in, Australia and Sydney do to help the people in Hong Kong?
As I have said, many times in interviews and even in talks, I am emphasizing on the fact that this really is not only a fight between Hong Kong and the Hong Kong government and the communist government behind them. It really is a very global fight where we are seeing these Chinese influences going into the whole global community. Recently I have received the news from my friend Badiu Cao in Melbourne. I'm going there in a few days, and so they are trying to organize this event in Melbourne, and they have received rejections from different venues, even the NGV, which is a government institution for the arts. And so they have quoted that it was out of security concerns, but still, it's a government institution, and for them to back down in such a fashion because of fear of whatever that might happen in response to all these clashes that has happened between Chinese students and the Hong Kong students. And that is something that is it's not an isolated situation. It's really happening everywhere in the world, where even some Hong Kong activists in Montreal, my hometown, have been banned from a gay pride because of, again, security concerns. So, and of course, all these governments who have silenced themselves because of the economic reasons, they don't want to lose the Chinese market. And so even in face of this kind of humanitarian crisis, they have said very limited things in face of this communist government. So now, are we going to accept that this will be the future of the global community, or are we going to do something about it? I mean, there are things that we can do, even as in the Australian society, because Hong Kong, in fact, is in a very special position where we are part of China, but also we have a completely different system with the whole Chinese economy. So we are still indispensable for the Chinese government. We are still this international hub where money comes in and out of China into the international world. So just very recently, the Australian government has signed this Australia-Hong Kong Free Trade Agreement, I think in March. And so, it shows that Hong Kong is in a very special position that is indispensable to the Chinese government. So on this, in this context, I think, we, the people, when the government are not able to speak up, then I think the people have the power and also the responsibility to speak up against these violations of human rights and the freedoms that is infiltrating the whole world. And by giving pressure to your government, whether you are an Australian, American, British, or Canadian, or everyone really in the world, I think there is something that is lying within us, as Hong Kong people have demonstrated. We really are the power, and not those who are in charge of the countries.
So write to your local MP, write to your local politician, make your voice heard, is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly, because we are the example of this kind of Chinese influences going into the society. We thought in the earlier days in Hong Kong that everything was fine, the economy was fine, but then after 22 years only, this is happening, and all those problems that were hidden, very well hidden, they have come to the surface. And so if this could happen to Hong Kong, then it could happen really anywhere. Like we are in the face of this government the Chinese government, who has no respect whatsoever for these promises that they have made, whether it's to Hong Kong or even between them and the British, where they have signed the joint declaration in 1984, and they have claimed that this is just a historic document that they do not have to respect. So how do you expect them to really respect anything, any agreement that they have with any other countries?
So I just want to pause here to say that we are going to be taking questions. So if you want to ask a question, there are mics, I believe, at that corner and one on the upper tier there. There'll be 15 minutes for questions. Please make sure it is a question and not a long statement, because I will be aiming to try and get through as many questions as possible so that everyone gets a chance to be heard. So if you're interested in asking a question now, please make your way over to the different microphones. But I've got one last question for Denise before we go to the Q&A, and it's, do you feel safe? Do you feel worried about your own safety? I mean, it's impossible to ignore the fact that there have been multiple arrests being made. People have been detained at the border. Do you feel like your relatively high profile insulates you from a lot of that? Or are you worried that it just makes you even more of a target?
Well, frankly speaking, I haven't been worried about that in at least for the very first part of the movement, up until maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago,
Right.
where we have seen a lot of mob violence, on the streets of Hong Kong and even outside of Hong Kong, where there are pro-Beijing communities who have been attacking Hong Kong people in Melbourne and like other places. And so that is something that is starting to concern me. And also, of course, the arrests that have happened in Hong Kong, they have been, the arrests that they did to the legislators, to the high-profile activists. So I guess basically I know there is this kind of threats and danger that are present, but still, when you look at these young people in the front lines, they are beaten up on a daily basis by the police, and they are being unreasonably arrested with really no means, no reasons behind them. And so somehow I feel my sacrifices are not really that high comparatively to them, because they are a whole generation who have put their future on the lines. And up to this date, I think there are more than 900 people arrested, and maybe even more after last night. So I'm part of them, and so I guess if there are threats, then so I'll just have to deal with it. Yeah.
Right. So I'd like to take the first question, if there's anyone who would like to step up to the mics. I think there's one up there and there's another one down there, right? So you're at number 1.
My question is sort of what's the sense on the ground in terms of fears of the army going in? I saw there was, the news reports on the build-up of the army on the edge of Hong Kong. Right. And is that something that people are afraid that will realistically happen?
Right. Well, in the earlier days where they first deployed the troops to the border in Shenzhen, we believe that it was mostly for show and for intimidation. So to get the people to go back home and to really not protest anymore. And that has been a tactic that we have seen during the umbrella movement. Because it's, for context, we have this whole generation of more elderly people who have witnessed the crackdown in 1989 on the Tiananmen massacre. And so that is a burden that is very present in the whole Hong Kong society. So the people have been circulating these rumors, and they have been asking, telling people, oh, let's not go protest anymore. But still, we have been through this. And so this time round, I think a lot of people are not afraid anymore. And personally, as I said just now, Hong Kong is still an international hub that is indispensable for China. And if they really were to deploy the troops, then it's not only us who have to face the consequences. The whole Chinese economy, they would have to face the consequences too. So is the Chinese government, is Xi Jinping ready to give up Hong Kong as this very important place to China? So I would say my answer to this question maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago would be it's a very, very low possibility. But right now, with the situation escalating, maybe that possibility has gone a little bit higher. But still, I don't see it as an immediate threat. But still, Hong Kong people are ready to face this very slight possibility of this happening. And but still, I think if they really did that, then it's really total chaos for even the whole China economy.
Right, it will be shooting itself in the foot.
Yes, of course. And with the trade war going on with the United States, and also the elections coming for Taiwan. So, no, we have to put this in the whole global context. And there is always this threat, but I don't think it's in the very, very high possibility just yet. Yeah. But nobody knows what's going to happen, in the coming days. Yeah.
Right. Is there another question? I think there's a queue forming at number 2. Yes, you're at the upper level.
Okay, thank you very much. Look, I understand you said don't make a long statement, but I put a couple of points I want to say, and I would like to see what was yes or no from you and your comments.
Yes.
I think Hong Kong, look, I was from mainland,
Yeah.
but honestly, I went to the 1st of July protest, and it was amazing, and every day watching everything going on there, and I'm really touched every single moment. Now, I want to see like the real thing, the real deal of Hong Kong going on there. I think we need to be more strategic.
Yes.
Because my true opinion is we're dealing with someone that, as civilized people, I would say, like Hong Kong people, never faced before, right?
Yes.
So, because I was from there, so basically I think I know a bit better than most people would know about the China and the Communist Party. Basically, I think that's the force behind the Hong Kong government.
Yes, of
Hong Kong government would really sit down, have a talk. Now we need to be more strategic. I think we can have 3 things at least. 3 strategies we can think. One is we can borrow some idea from mainlanders, like people from mainland. I know like most people think maybe, they're actually supporting the government, this and that. But actually there are people out there, in there, they really love Hong Kong in a certain way. And I believe there's some strategy because they know the government they very well. So that's one. Secondly is the police power in Hong Kong. I believe we can have a certain way to speak to them, because nowadays what happens on the streets, clashing every day, every single protest is very, very, disturbing at least. So I believe they're Hong Kong people. The policemen are Hong Kong people. So you guys find a way, speak to them, right? Also, a third power I believe you guys can speak to is someone in the government, I think, or someone related to that, yeah.
Right. So basically draw more support from people in mainland China who might be supportive, speak to the Hong Kong police officers, and try and get support from the Chinese government.
Well, no, thank you for speaking up. I want to make a point out of the fact that actually I have nothing against mainlanders, because I have a lot of friends in mainland, and I agree completely with you that there must be maybe a small minority, but there must be people in mainland who know what's happening, but they cannot really speak up given the situation in mainland. So I agree that we need to get all this information and the truth into mainland to let the people know that we are not rioters. This is something that the Chinese government and the Hong Kong government, they want to frame us into, but we are not rioters. We are just asking for what has been promised to us in the basic law and by the Chinese government. And so, but it is really difficult, really. First, what you have said for the police, like personally, I know that, I know that the police, there must be some of them just in a very similar situation as the people in the mainland. There must be some who know what's right and wrong, but like they have this huge pressure on them that they cannot say much. And but on the other hand, in the front lines, just as we have witnessed last night, we have so many like aunties and uncles who are on the streets trying to talk some sense into the police force, and it's just not working. Like somehow, like the whole tension and the emotions going on the streets, it's just taking over any sense, at least in the police who are in the front lines. And also there have been like some evidence saying that there are Chinese police who have been helping out in the Hong Kong police force. And that was why they don't have the warrant cards and the identity, and some have, just last night actually, there was footage of the commanders speaking in Putonghua, in Mandarin, to the police officers, which is a very weird thing because Hong Kong people speak in Cantonese. So, like really, I agree that we have to be really, really strategic. And I have quite a lot of confidence in our people, including the young generations who have proven to be very capable in finding solutions in the past 13 weeks. So, and I agree that we have to, in spite of all this frustration, we have to keep a certain level of calm in order to find these solutions and to really react to everything that's happening on such a huge speed every day. Yeah.
I think we've got time for 2 more questions if people keep it very snappy. So the person at number 1.
Hello, Denise.
Hi.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you.
That gentleman upstairs has already pretty much touched on what I was going to ask about. I'm going to push ahead with the question anyway. Not everybody who speaks Putonghua is against Hong Kong,
Yes,
as aptly demonstrated. There are Singaporean, Taiwanese,
Yes.
lots of mainland Chinese,
Yes.
1.4 billion, huge amount of diversity. How do we harness that? How do Hong Kongers, how do we get them on your side? And one of the things I can think about is we can emphasize one country, two system. That without one is it diminishes the other. So we can say, yes, I'm in support of one country, but you maintain the two system. The moment you erode the two system, I'm going to pull up stumps with the one country. I'm going to no more one country. So if you can frame that, I feel that's one way to harness more of the nationalists and less of the communists towards your side of the protest. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, we really obviously have very smart people in the audience today. Yeah. And, well, I mean, it's a conversation that is not one-sided. I mean, as I said, I am one of the participants of this whole movement. And that's the beauty of this movement, is that everyone really can voice out your strategy, like anyone here. And sometimes when I think about it, like I'm thinking, should we be going back to the earlier days where we are passing out these messages in mooncakes? And really going back to the very organic stage where we pass through that digital, the control of the government, and really that might be something that might work. Like just get the message out. So in these very this surveillance state, we have to think past that, and maybe in these organic ways, and everyone can be a part of that. But of course, be safe. If anyone's from mainland China here, is a real threat, where we have seen a lot of people who have been trying to go into China, and they have been detained, and some even disappeared. There have been this...
Simon Tsjeng.
Yeah, Simon Tsjeng from the UK consulate has disappeared. And so be safe and be smart and be strategic. That's what I can say at the moment. Yeah.
We've probably got time for one more question. So
thank you.
At number 2.
Hi, everyone. So I'm a Hong Kongers, of course, and I'm very proud of everyone here. We're very confident. We're also very courageous people. One question is, while we're so courageous, going to the front, fighting for all this freedom for ourselves, do you have any ideas or strategies that you can tell us how to protect our families from Hong Kong, from all this like crazy chaos? Because seeing like every single day, seeing all this sadness from Hong Kong, I just feel so helpless. I don't know what we can do from Australia to help them. And also some of my families from Hong Kong, they are like standing at the front fighting for our own freedom, and they got arrested and we just don't know what to do sitting at home. What is your advice, what we can do to help our people and to help our families as well? So yeah, that's it for my question.
Thank you. I totally understand your feeling, because last night I was watching the live feed. It's the first time that I have been away from the people in these very critical times. So I was feeling very, very guilty, and it was very, very heartbreaking when I saw all those images. But, you know, at the same time, last night I had a thought, like, should I be going home? No, should I just leave this and then go home right away? But then I reflected on it and I came to the conclusion that no, because we all have our own roles in this movement, whether you are on the ground in Hong Kong or, you know, as myself, I have been invited to different forums and conferences to get the word out to other people. And, you know, maybe my role today is to empower everyone, you know, by sharing my story. And so my response to that is that do whatever you think you can, even if that seems like just a pointless thing, or, you know, something that is so-called useless comparatively to what's happening on the ground. Because this movement only became this movement because of everyone pitching in, whether you're in Hong Kong or even overseas, where we have seen different rallies, different university students standing up for Hong Kong, even when they are in face of intimidation themselves. So no, there is no one right answer for everyone. No, there is no answer that fit one size fits all. It's really like what are you best at? Like what is the thing that you are most capable of? Then just do that. I really believe in this fact where, you know, you see these moms and dads coming in onto the streets, even the elderly, we call them the silver hair clad. I don't know how to explain that, like 銀髮族. So you see everyone pitching in, and no one is thinking, oh no, I'm so small and I'm so useless. Nobody is thinking that anymore. So just really do what you think you can do.
Thank you very much for your question.
No. Thank you. And really get the word out to other Australians, tell them about the situation, and really not only saying that it's a situation in Hong Kong, but a global problem that we are facing together.
So I think on that note, we've come to the end of this conversation. Please join me in thanking Denise Ho for joining us at
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. 香港人，香港人。Yep. Thank you.